Hello and welcome to the Sallen Coefficient, a video review series in which I take a look at the strategic depth of a game and compare it to that game's length and weight and tell you whether or not it is worth your time. I'm Joe Sallen, host of the Good, the Bored, and the Ugly board game podcast, and also now co-host of the Longview podcast together with TC Reed. And this is a little side project I'm doing where I give my own opinions about different games that I choose, and I'm going to tell you guys about how it works. As by popular request, I'm going to be giving you a walkthrough of how to play Modern Art before I actually go into my thoughts on the game. And then at the end, I've got a little new thing that I'm going to be doing here called critical comparisons, where I'm actually going to be looking at Modern Art and comparing it to a few other games that might be kind of similar. Though with how long ago Modern Art came out, it's kind of tough. I feel like just comparing it to anything is almost unfair. Just this game has been out for 25 years. You can see this is the newest edition right here from CMON Games, and it is it's got all new pieces and all new artwork. These are all new recent artwork, and it is now actually 25 years since the original Modern Art came out. So kind of an interesting 25-year anniversary, though it doesn't say necessarily that it is an anniversary edition. Anyway, let me get to telling you guys all about Modern Art, and we'll first of all talk about how it plays. In a game of Modern Art, you're trying to get the most money. You start out all with the same amount, $100. And on your turn, you're also going to start out with a certain amount of cards. These cards are going to be in one of 5 different suits, which are colors, and they're all identical in terms of how much they are worth, but they do have a difference, kind of almost a cosmetic difference in terms of the type of auction you're going to have, but it's a little bit more than cosmetic. I'll get into that a little bit later. Anyway, each card is going to have an artwork, a unique painting on it, and then the name of its artist. And that is also going to have in the upper corner a type of auction or a type of way the card is played. Anyway, you're going to be dealt a certain amount of these cards depending on how many players there are. And so you've got a hand of cards, and the game is going to start with a specific player. In the rulebook, it says the youngest player. They're going to play a card on their turn, and that card is going to be auctioned off for the rest of the players. It represents a painting because players are all art dealers trying to make the most money in the art buying and selling world of art dealing. So this card, if I played it, it would go up for bid, and it is a specific type of auction where it says here that it's a closed auction, so everybody's going to choose a certain amount of money secretly, and then they're going to all reveal at the same time. You have these nifty little blinds to be able to show people, to be able to hide people, rather, their money from other players, and you've got this nice little handy-dandy auction hammer that I find I always forget about, but it is kind of nice when a round ends to be able to remember whose turn it is, but this generally passes to different players to remind them whose turn it is. Anyway, cards will continue to be played until one type of painting reaches, or one type of artist reaches 5 paintings, and that 5th painting, no matter who played it, gets discarded. Then that artist, because it was the most popular artist of the time, is actually going to get its paintings worth more than anybody else. This says $30 on it. This is the most any painting can be worth in a round from that specific round. The second most will get 20, and then the third will get 10. And in the first round, it's very simple. That's how much all the paintings that are in front of you sell for. There's 2 blank spots where there's no money, and that means those 2 artist paintings were not sought after and were not purchased, and so you just have to discard them if you have any. You'll do this for 4 rounds, and in each subsequent round, you will add together the value of any previous round's paintings value. So basically, like if it was 20 in the first round and the second round is 20, now they're worth 40. However, what if in the third round, there's not enough to make them worth anything? There's not enough to add a 10, 20, or 30 to them, then they're worthless. So basically, yes, it snowballs, but there's always going to be at least 2 types of paintings from artists that are worthless in every round. So ties are broken in favor of the yellow, which is on the left-hand side, and then which is the strongest, and then the orange is the weakest. However, that's balanced in the deck because there is actually an additional card of every color as you go further towards the weaker side. So there's only 12 yellow cards, but there's 17 orange cards. So that kind of balances with that specific aspect. At the end of every round, you'll sell all your paintings for money, and then the round starts again with whoever is next in turn order until finally you hit the end of 4 rounds. Players sell their paintings, and whoever has the most money wins the game. I haven't really talked much about the specific types of auction. There is 4 different types of auction in the game, and those 4 different types are all pretty similar to one another. One of them is just the like open auction where you're just like $1, $2, and you know you can get your auctioneer votes going. There's another one that's the hidden one that I showed you guys. There is a price tag auction, which is actually not even an auction at all. It's the person playing the card sets the price, and then there's one more type, and that is a once a round auction. So starting with the player to the left of the person playing the card, you're actually going to start with them, and then every player gets 1 chance to bid. Highest bid wins. Usually that means the person who played the card gets a chance to play the card and then bid $1 higher than everybody else, so they get to take it. So anyway, you'll play, see who has the most money, and then that's it. That's all there is to the game of modern art. Except, of course, I always forget things. There's these cards that are called, let's say, a little ×2 instead of an auction symbol. Well, that means that you'll play the ×2 card and another card by the same artist, and then you make it a double auction of whatever the second type is. And so then you're just basically taking 2 auctions in one. So there's several cards that are like that. Anyway, that's how you play the game of modern art. So now let me tell you, first of all, about the production in modern art. This new edition of modern art does things quite a bit different than the last edition that I played. Now, I'm not 100% sure if it is the first and only or whatever version of modern art, but I can tell you that the version of modern art that I played had small cards, just average deck-sized cards, standard card size, and all the art in that was very shapes, like very much shapes and not figures. You could not really distinguish much in that art for the most part. It tended to be very abstract to the point of being pretty much like shapes, figures, lines, colors. So kind of explorations in those aspects, but not so much like these ones. You can definitely see like this painting has, you know, distinguishable characters in them. So all the paintings are new and the cards are much larger. So production-wise, what I would say is that this version of modern art is just much more appealing to the individual that might not be much of a fan of modern art. I think that modern art itself is very much into asking the viewer about what art really is. What counts as art? What is something that actually qualifies as being art, as opposed to back the ancient and Renaissance, prior to the Renaissance, anything was art if it depicted real life in a well done way, kind of. So things that did not look real life were considered bad art in the past, and now modern art looks to challenge you to even consider whether or not it is art. In this game, I would say, generally people that are conventional, looking for conventional, just well-designed art, as in like from, you know, as in, you can see here the type of art that's on the cover is very indicative of what you'll see in here. It's interesting, bizarre, but still conventional enough so that I don't feel uncomfortable looking at it. I don't feel like, let's put it like this, my brain registers it as art. And I don't think that all modern art is generally like that. However, having been to art museums and taken an art history class, I can tell you right now that some of the strongest art I've ever seen is art that at first meant nothing to me. And it wasn't until I heard the description of what the artist was looking for, or I just sat and pondered it, that really modern art comes to bring you, I think, what it's really looking for. So I don't think that that any type of art in board games necessarily is worthy of just being dismissed or lauded immediately. But I do think that this specific sphere of life that we're talking about in terms of modern art breeds a much more in-depth discussion of the specific merits of its style. However, like I said, conventional people, you're going to like what's here, I think. And so as a result, I think in general, the people that are not looking to essentially visit a museum as they play a game are going to be very happy with the way that this game looks. The cards are really big. The focus is the art. That's what I really like about this new version. I'm able to pore over what's going on and what they were really looking for, and how like there's almost like an issue of perspective in this one that I'm looking at right now. And then this one looks like it's almost like the comic book art that's done in with little tiny dots that kind of make up the larger color, and almost an exploration of that. There's just so many interesting things that I'm able to consider as I play. The guy that has this artist here who has this on the cover, his artwork kind of reminds me of Matisse, who painted the image of a pipe that said underneath it, "This is not a pipe," in French. And anyway, it's just some really interesting art that I think that you're going to find pleasant, even if you're not into modern art. And I think modern art people are going to be able to find things, though there isn't necessarily anything that's challenging me on the degree that a lot of modern art does. So I think, though, that's, you know, in board games, you're not really setting people down necessarily to take them through an art museum. I really love this specific edition. I think that the other pieces that are involved here, we've got cardboard, nice cardboard. We've got, you know, decent enough blinds. They're kind of larger than they needed to be. I do like that they're themed after, wow, that's upside down. That's in Museum in Madrid. I like that they're themed after real life museums. You know, they don't actually have the name like the Reina Sofia that's in Madrid, but the thing is, like, I remember these, having been to a couple of these places. So very nice artwork that's being used, but at the same time, it's just really functional. You know, I think that really what happens a lot of times, especially on the eve of a 25th anniversary of such a classic game like this, a company will take it and be like, we're going to make this deluxeified version. And I got to tell you, I am not going to pay 3 times the amount of money that I'd pay for modern art just because you made some giant production that's arguably even worth it. I mean, why do we have to have giant pieces and metal coins in every single game? Some games are just nice to have pieces that work, that are functional, and they kept the price point down as a result of it. That's what I have to say about the production here. I love that there are artists. The rulebook is 4 pages, but then this is like 25 pages more of art and descriptions of the artists and saying what they've done, like a little bio. So, I mean, this really does love the art and the artists that make it. Very, very cool. Now let's talk about the gameplay. That's the most important part. Card play in this game is the first decision you're going to be met with. You have a certain amount of cards on your turn, and you have 2 different things that these cards have on them. They have a type of artist and they have a type of auction. So you're going to have to choose what card you want. Now, the first thing to take into consideration is the type of artist, and you are dealt a fairly large amount of cards in the game. You have quite a bit of knowledge of what cards you can play in the future. That's very important. And at the end of the game, you're not even going to play all these cards. You're going to be able to just kind of hold on to a bunch of them. Players really are in control of what paintings enter the market. What you're not in control of, though, is what paintings are in your other players' hands. You aren't able to see them, and so you're making kind of some educated guesses based on people's play styles as to what types of paintings they have and who they're willing to support, because they know that they've got them maybe in their back pocket because they've got several paintings by that artist that they can continue to increase. If you remember from my walkthrough, the more paintings that are by that artist that are in the market, the more valuable they are that round. So that's why it's very frequently important for you to take a look at all your cards, arrange them, and then decide, like, okay, well, if I've got a bunch of green here, I'm going to make green amazing. I'm going to make it the best painting that's out here as much as I can. Now, at the same time, you have to kind of decide based on what has been played in that round. Every round's going to reset. But if there's been 2 orange cards played and I play a double orange, I'm making orange like incredibly good, which means I might get a bunch of money. So making decisions based on what's out there and making decisions based on what you think is going to get you money, because there's 2 main ways to make money in this game. Either whenever you auction a card, you are actually going to have to pay the player that played the card. So it's like we're all auctioning off our own thing. That might not have been clear in the walkthrough, but hopefully you stayed this long so you do know. When you play a card, you're the one who gets paid. Unless you buy it yourself, you pay the bank. So the main ways to make money are by having paintings in front of you, or by getting paid by auctioning off really good paintings that other players want. You do that by auctioning off paintings that are already owned. But every time you auction a painting that's already owned, you're helping every player that already owns it by making it more valuable that round. It's a very interesting system. Anyway, that's your main card play choice. Every card also does have your little symbol for auctions. And so now I'm going to talk about the auctions in the game, because this is like auctions, the auction game. They literally could have called it auctions, the auction game, and they would have been very accurate, because I feel like there's a little smorgasbord of almost every type of auction you can imagine in a game, except for the normal one we're used to. In most games that I play with auctions, it just goes, I go, you go, you go, you go, and we keep going around until all players have passed but one. In this game, you don't have any auctions like that. Instead, they've got the $1, $2, $2, $3, $3, and you got your person who can do your auctioneer voice, going to do a lot better job at that than I am. But it feels very just refreshing, because I'm not used to games that have this open auction like that. And I honestly think it's kind of a dangerous thing to put in a game, because it can make it feel like it's devolving. But at the same time, I like that it's just occasionally, it's just like you get to breathe, and it's just like, okay, well, this is an auction that has no rules. I can say whatever I want, whenever I want, as long as I'm upping the bid of what's already been played. So very cool there, and including an open auction. The other three types of auction involve a very stressful decision, but the player making that stressful decision is going to change based on what type of auction it is. You've got auctions that are once around. That puts the pressure on every player except for the auctioneer. You've got the fixed price, which puts the pressure on the auctioneer. They have to say a price that is not going to be so cheap that people are just like, oh, don't mind if I do, that they're stuck with it and can't do anything with that painting at the end of the round. So very much inverses of one another there. The last type of auction is a closed fist auction, which is equally stressful for everyone. So 4 different types of auctions in this game, very much changing the feel and the pace, like a little smorgasbord taste of all these different types of auctions, but it does feel like they ultimately balance each other out. However, based on what types of cards are in your hand, you have to decide, you know, who's going to get the pressure put on them. If you're like me, you want the pressure on you. Like, the decisions are what I come to the game for. If other players, if I'm playing cards to then put pressure on other players, I'm not really participating so much. I'm just kind of reacting to what they do. So I kind of like it when I'm the one who has to come up with a tough choice. However, it really does involve an awful lot of player skill, and that's probably why I always lose this game, because I'm always pushing myself to do things that I'm not probably capable of. Anyway, that's the type of auctions that you'll find in modern art, and I'm a huge fan of how it just, none of them, they could have just been simple, easy, once-around auctions, and this game probably wouldn't have got the same sticking power that it has. Maybe it would. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, it's 25 years ago, so at that point, the standards weren't exactly at what they are today, but I really think that just the nice little breath of fresh air I get from all these different types of auctions, together with the crunchiness that I mentioned before of the card play, is just the two beautiful things about modern art. Now, let's keep talking here. The next little bit is about the closed, wait, hold on. The economy of this game. I'm sorry, the closed thing. We already talked about closed fist auctions. Anyway, we've mentioned that. It does put the pressure on everybody equally. Kind of interesting, but very much up to player specific. Like, it feels really strange. It feels like an awful lot of stress. And those closed fist auctions, I'm usually not a fan of. Here they work, because that's what the whole game is about. All right, so now let's move on to an economic game. An economic game, it's all about the one resource in the game that wins you the game is the only thing that you're going to be spending. So you're going to have to spend money to make money. If you don't do anything in this game, you're probably not going to make all that much money. You usually make money by at least owning some paintings and getting to sell those. But when do you do that and where is really determined by all the different auctions that are happening to the game. Now, it's all about capital gains, like I said, but if I put up a player, an artist's painting that's already out there, I'm helping everybody that's out there. However, I think that at that point, maybe I've made the decision that I'm willing to give up this and help other people out for the amount of capital I'm going to gain from it. In the game that I just played with my wife, who just had learned the game, she beat the crap out of all the other players because she was the one selling the most paintings. She was selling paintings, and all it cost her was the only other resource in the game besides money, your turn. Well, I guess cards maybe too, but anyway, your turn is a big resource in this game. The fact that that your turn always moves around, the only way to make a painting worth $30 in a round is by wasting one player has to waste their turn. They don't get a painting for that. All they do is just make it the most expensive. So there has to be some real incentive for them to do that. It's an interesting little decision that goes into the card play and also their economy in terms of the turns. So the other aspect here is I think that the economy of this game is on a perfect scale. I think that if this game was a super tight economic game, like I love my drafting games like PAX Renaissance, PAX Pamir. I love how those games can get so tight because you only have so many options and you're never going to have that many more. And you're always going to have to be making tough calls and analyzing how much the other players have, and it's never going to be that much. I'm really interested in that in many game designs. Here, it's a little looser. And the thing that I think is really important there is in an auction game, there needs to be a healthy gray area. You need to have an area between where you know, like, okay, that's worth $4, definitely not 5. I don't think that works in auction games. Here, it's like almost like little penny raises that ultimately win or lose you the game, because you got to consider that person's getting paid for it, and then the person who gets it is going to be making X amount of dollars. A lot of times players can get carried away and say, oh, that painting's going to be worth $70 this round. Yeah, but if you just paid $70 for it, how much are you making? Zero. Absolutely nothing. The person that played the card just made $70. That's what just happened. They just won. Anyway, guys, you can see what I'm saying here, that like the fact that it's tough to decide when to stop upping the bid, exactly what to bid, is really important, that there's at least a little bit of leeway. But there's not like on the scale of like you're going to see paintings that are going for more money, that so much money that you ever have to get out a calculator. And that's a really important part here, that this game does not have, you know, any math that's ever going to be too tough to do in your head. It's all just very interesting, and I'm very engaged by the economy in the game. So I love the way that the game is going to consistently crescendo until the point where in the last round you could sell a painting for $90. So, I mean, you're consistently crescendoing, which means that players are going to be just as engaged, maybe even more engaged, more stuck to their seats than they were at the start of the game, because now every painting sold is worth so much more. Like I've had it said before, in the second to last round of a game by my good friend on my podcast, Trent, he said when somebody played a double auction that was like a fixed price tag, he looked at the person that set the price and said, if you price this wrong, you are giving away the game. So, I mean, that late round crescendo is so clutch, but you have to have the capital from the early rounds to do anything. So very, very cool there. I love the way the economy scales and the way it crescendos as the game goes on. Next up, interactivity. I'm pretty sure this game is all about interaction, because I think that there's not so much strategic depth here. I mean, you've got so many cards that you have in your hand, but other players are able to impact the economy in ways that you can't foresee. Like if I play a blue card, it could be that the rest of my group now wants blue to get totally wrecked because I played that blue card. And that's what generally happens, because I have such amazing, wonderful friends that would love to see me do nothing but go bankrupt. But that seems to me like almost an element of self-expression that can happen in this game. However, because of how reactive the economy is, about how reactive every single decision that you make in this game is going to have some sort of an impact on the rest of the game. Most of the time, you can play a painting that is worthless, but for the most part, every time you're going to be playing a painting, it's going to be continually contributing to the future of the value of all the paintings for every player. It is so reactive, but it is also so butterfly flapping its wings in first round means tsunamis and tidal waves in the last round. It is an absolute blast, and I feel like decisions have lots and lots of impact as a result of that. So that's my point about interactivity. It is pretty much everything that's going on here. Every player together determines the value of the market. Very, very intriguing that way, though. There is one specific issue I take with modern art, and that is the double auction cards. The cards where you just get to play this card and another card for free. It's like taking a free turn. And how do you get those cards? They get dealt to you randomly. You're basically able to double auction and take a free turn. And I think that in that aspect, it is a little bit lucky. It can definitely get a little bit lucky. And I think that just the rest of the game is so purely interactive, purely at the core of what's fun about commodity speculation and auctions between players where the players determine that economy. That when you've got a player that's just like, oh, hey, I get to double auction this turn. Hope you guys don't mind. I feel almost like if you're going to have those double auctions, they should all be shuffled into a separate deck, and players should have a distributed amount maybe, or just, you know, I guess that it's a little bit, you do have to have other cards to play with it, and you can play that to really impact the economy. But it just seems to me silly, like, well, I sold a painting for $30. Now you just sold a double painting. Of course it's worth, you know, $60. So you get double the money. Anyway, it's just one little thing that is just a tiny little hiccup in an otherwise amazing game. It does kind of hurt my overall Sallen Coefficient for the game. The Sallen Coefficient is its strategic depth. And in this case, I'm taking into consideration the interactivity that's really at the core of what this game is all about. And the Sallen Coefficient for this game is an 8. My personal view is a 9. I love this game. I'm able to forgive that the ×2 does give it quite a bit of drama to the game, but the Sallen Coefficient suffers just a hair from it. This game could have easily been a 9. I can't imagine what a 10 looks like, so a 9 to me is pretty much a perfect score on the Sallen Coefficient, which goes 1 to 10. But an 8 is just amazing. It means that it has not only my own recommendation, but the recommendation of the metric system I'm trying to enforce onto this game and trying to sort of lay over onto all the games that I review. So very much a cool addition, a very great concept, and I think you should really check out Modern Art. So as I said, Sallen Coefficient, an 8 out of 10. My personal rating, a 9 out of 10. I'm able to forgive that just a little bit because I just love, I think for me, it's about the way that the art theme is so well depicted here, this art dealings. So anyway, the way that it's almost like the people that are buying and selling it have so much of an impact onto its value, which seems so maybe kind of wrong, but I think that's what Reiner Knizia was really getting at with his auctions like Dream Factory, that was about how interlocking all the different deals were in Hollywood and involved auctions as well. So anyway, I'm now going to do a little section here where it's called Critical Comparisons, where I'm going to compare this to other games. First off, I got a little comment here from my little brother who was tuning in for this. I told him I was going to be doing this, and I'm so happy to hear that that he did jump on here, and he asked me to compare it to Dixit. You know, he could have just been trolling me, but I'm going to take it seriously. These cards here compare to Dixit kind of in an interesting way that some of them I think could work perfectly as Dixit cards, where other ones tend to be more abstract, and I don't think that you're going to be able to really do much and say much about Dixit except for, you know, the colors that are here. But that's not all of them. This one is a pretty bad example, but I do think there are ones that it's kind of tough to make anything out specifically. And at Dixit, those specific cards really need to be identifiable. They have to have identifiable plots to them, sort of at an across the table way, across the table, because you're not going to be examining every single card. Dixit's just a fast, fun game. And here you're not going to be examining cards if you don't want to, but you can really pour over them. But these ones definitely don't have necessarily a plot or a specific thesis from across the table like Dixit does. And they're not based on fairy tales like Dixit was. Here I think that most of these artists are modern artists from reading the rule book and the art book. I think they're mainly from Brazil, and they really got some great stuff here. I think that they probably were able to use some really excellent artists' work by including these bios and, you know, telling people all about them. So the art collectors out there, if you're watching this, can just use this as a way to recruit your new art to be patrons for. Next up, comparison that I came up with is maybe being the closest comparison to modern art is specifically Container. Container is a game in which players start, the only thing that's at all different between players is everybody has a different sort of goal card, and it makes you want a different type of good. But everybody, you know that everybody else has a goal card that's pretty much different than yours, the inverse of yours. So what you do in the game is you make factories, produce goods, ship these goods. And then you have blind bidding for what happens, which to me, there's blind bidding in modern art, and it's all about commodity speculation. Big differences here in modern art is there's a lot more hidden information in terms of what's in your hand than necessarily what is in Container. But as a result, I think that there's just more in general meat here on the bone in terms of being able to try to deduce what's in other players' hands and able to the round tends to grow much more. Whereas I feel kind of like I love Container. I really do. I like the game a lot, but I don't put it as high as Modern Art because to me at the start, Container feels a little bit aimless. Like there's different strategies, but you're not really, I mean, you have to go necessarily in one direction or another. I think that it's got interesting commodity speculation, just like in Modern Art, but it doesn't have the ebb and flow and the carryover from one round to the next necessarily that Modern Art does. But it does definitely have, like, you're kind of putting these different pieces onto the country and has some interesting other interactions. The main thing is that Container goes quite a bit longer than Modern Art, and I really think that I prefer Modern Art for that. The Modern Art you can get done in like 45 minutes. I guess it says an hour on the side of the box, but to me, it's a small games rules-wise. I was able to explain it to my wife in like, 5 minutes, if that. And she really doesn't like learning games, but she did just fine here. It was a little rocky at first, which, I mean, an auction game is just going to be rocky in general because you don't know what things are worth until you've at least seen it go for a while. But I really think that in terms of rules-wise, Modern Art wins out on Container that way. There's less things that you have to worry about, but there's definitely more. You can kind of see more into the future, whereas Container is very much just based on what players do. And there's no game element that necessarily tells you what direction they're headed in, aside from just what you've seen them do in the past and where you think they might be headed. So anyway, Container to me, best example of a comparison. So if you really like Container, I think you should try out Modern Art. If you've not, you might consider Modern Art more of a filler than Container, but I think that it would be right up your alley that way. Next game that I'm going to compare it to is also by Reiner Knizia. It's called Raw. Raw is a game that's about auctions as well, but the auctioning in Raw is very limited into how much you can bid because you're only able to win 3 auctions around, and every time you win an auction, there's just these little tiles that you're bidding with, and then they go 1 through 13. So I think that Raw to me has much more of like, it feels like the players versus the game in an auction setting, and I feel like Modern Art is much more of the players versus the players, and the game almost in ways kind of melts away. I mean, there is like like in Container, it very much is just the players versus the players pretty much. But here you've got a little bit that you can see just enough to be able to give you some sort of an idea of what direction you are hoping to head. But what other players do is very much going to be what you're making reactions to. So yes, I agree. Very fun, both of those games. Next up, Princes of Florence, which is a game that is considered a classic by many. And Princes of Florence has several different auctions in the game. Well, I shouldn't say several different auctions. Really, it just has one auction. And it's kind of weird. It's almost arbitrary the way that the designer decided to make certain things. It's actually designers, I'm sorry. But they decided to make certain things worth auctioning, and then other things you just kind of get, from decks of cards and stuff like that. It definitely is a game that you can put a lot of time and effort into planning, and you can pull off some really cool moves. But the auctions specifically in Modern Art are so much more player determined that I feel like there's just a lot more, I don't know, there's a lot more auction meat here than there is in Princes of Florence. Honestly, Princes of Florence, like when you play that game as a new player, you almost have to have your experienced players telling you how much you need to bid on things, because there are certain things that are just so good. Whereas in Modern Art, I feel like players can't really give advice to other players because so much of it is just interactive. And that's what's so great about it. What are we sitting down at a table for? If you're sitting down for looking at how you can outsmart your opponents by being able to look and read into a game system and see what direction you're headed in, I don't think you're going to find that in Modern Art. Go find something like by Vital Lacerda or Princes of Florence, which I just was talking about. But here in Modern Art, it's really just table with other players and deciding together what everything is worth, and players have that just a little bit of information that they can kind of use as leverage to make the best out of what situation other players have created for them to interact with. So those are the comparison to Princes of Florence is that the auctions in Princes of Florence, to me, not very entertaining. I really especially dislike how some of the things that you're auctioning are incredibly good, whereas in this game, you just can't, it's so much about speculation. In Princes of Florence, it's an auction, but it's barely about speculation, so why is it an auction? Shouldn't there just be like a certain price tag that attaches to each one of these things? I mean, The only thing that I can think of is in Princess of Florence, you can get super lucky if you're the last player left and somebody leaves you the last player left, because everybody only gets to auction things off once. And if everybody uses their auction, there's something really good left, you just get to get it for like the cheapest thing possible, which there is like minimum bids. But anyway, I'm being a little critical of Princess of Florence, but I think that's the necessarily auction part of the game. And here in Modern Art, that's what shines. Modern Art is an absolute classic. Modern Art is 25 years old, and it plays just as relevant today as it did 25 years ago. When I had a friend ask me recently, what classic games do I like? This is a friend who's a non-gamer, didn't know anything about games. He was thinking Monopoly. He was thinking Scrabble. He was thinking Risk. I was thinking Modern Art. That's the Sallen Coefficient, my review, my thoughts on Modern Art. I hope that's been helpful. And I hope that you'll subscribe to these videos and tell me what you think about this style specifically. I hope it wasn't too long for you. And before I'm done, though, I do need to, well, I don't need to, I want to. I want to tell you guys about my sponsor, Game Surplus. They are an online game store, so they are selling all different types of games. Modern Art, I believe, is on their shelves now because they can now carry the Asmodee stuff. Anyway, Game Surplus is a very mom and pop type of company, but they're on the internet. And it involves Carmen, who's a gentleman, owns the business, and Elaine, his wife, and they are just dedicated to amazing service. And they are somehow, I don't know how they do it, they're somehow coming up with prices that compete with and very frequently beat out the big box stores out there in these, and they offer a lower shipping threshold and just the best shipping in the business. So anyway, check them out at Game Surplus. Also, please subscribe to this. Check out my podcast, The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. The Long View, if you're interested. The Long View, I believe, has an episode about modern art that was released before I was the host of it, back when the old great Jeff Gamble was on it. Join the Good, the Bored, and the Ugly's YouTube or Board Game Geek Guild. If you're not familiar, BoardGameGeek.com is the place to go for board games, anything board games. And just have a great time playing games, and I hope that you're able to get as much enjoyment in your life out of modern art, or at least you know that it's not for you, because that's what the point of these reviews are. I will catch you on the next Sallen Coefficient video. Bye-bye.